Welcome back to the Pro Series podcast. This is episode 164. Today's guest is Nicholas Capman. Nicholas is the owner and founder of the FDA Group and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller book called The Passionate Workforce: How to Create and Maintain Maximum Employee Engagement. We talk all about that. We talk about his business, how he got into it, some of his career before he got into his business. But before we get into this episode, please like, subscribe, and review this podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. And now I hope you enjoy episode 164 with Nicholas Capman. Nicholas, thank you so much for hopping on the Pro Series podcast today. Excited to talk to you about not only your book, but your background and your professional career. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your workday.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
Yeah, well, I will always want to get started on how you got started in your business, and kind of give them like where the starting point. So it could be high school, college, wherever you thought your career kind of started.
Yeah. The common question that I get asked is, how did I start my business? I think that'll probably answer the question that you asked.
Absolutely.
I went to school to be a high school history teacher. That's what I went to the university for.
Okay.
And when I graduated, the state of Massachusetts, where I live, and lived, was going through budget cuts. So they were laying teachers off, not hiring.
Mhm.
And so the closest place that I could find a job was in South Carolina. And so I told my grandmother, I said, "Hey, Grammy, I found a job and it looks like it's going to be in South Carolina." And she said, "Oh, you can't leave." And I said, "I can't." And she goes, "Of course not." And I said, "Oh, okay." So that 7-second conversation changed the whole trajectory of my life. Needless to say, I ended up getting a job locally. And my first job out of college was selling phone service door to door.
Okay.
And the company that had employed me had hired all recent college graduates. So the talk in the office was, get 2 years sales experience under your belt. Then you can go apply for a pharmaceutical sales position, selling pills to doctors, and that's where the money's at. So, as a naive college graduate, I said, "Sure, sounds great." Got my 2 years, started applying for jobs. But instead of getting hired by a pharmaceutical company, I ended up getting hired by a multinational pharmaceutical engineering firm that engineered the lines to manufacture the drug products.
Very cool.
And so I was placed as the head of North American business development at the age of 23. Um, to which, some people say, "Wow, that's impressive." To which I respond, "You should be less impressed by me and more repulsed by the person that thought it was a good idea to make a 23-year-old head of North American business development." I did what most 23-year-olds would do. I made a lot of mistakes and I learned a lot of lessons. While I was there, I decided to get my MBA, and I had a professor that said he had started his first business, which was a bagel shop, at the age of 26.
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, I'm 26, so I need to start a company." There was a sliver of the business that did compliance consulting, which is essentially helping pharmaceutical companies ensure that they're compliant with FDA regulations. So I thought I could do that. I created a website. My goal was to make an extra $15,000 a year. I ended up moving to another company because A, now there was a conflict, and B, they were going through a merger and there was somebody else that did my job that was obviously better. And so kind of the writing was on the wall. And so I used to run my business out of my car in the parking lot during my lunch breaks. And the company kept doubling and tripling every year. And eventually I said I should probably just stop this as a side hustle and make it a full-time gig. And fast forward to today, we've been recognized by Inc. magazine as being one of the fastest growing companies in America 4 years in a row. And we're headquartered in Massachusetts. So the Boston Business Journal recognized us as being one of the top 50 fastest growing companies in Massachusetts 2 years in a row. And first year we won, we were ranked number 3 in the state. So that is the story.
That's awesome. Let's dive in a little bit to go back to your move to South Carolina. Was that a teaching job?
It was.
You,
It was
okay,
going
so
to be. Yep.
so when you had that conversation with your grandma and you decided to stay, did it go through your head like, what do I do? Like, if there's no teaching jobs here in Massachusetts and staying here is the only option, like, what do I do for professional wise?
No.
No. Okay.
No. Because prior to going to school, it was always just you go and look and see who's hiring. I had a bachelor's degree, so I knew I was going to apply to a job that required a bachelor's degree. And I had never made real money before. It was always minimum wage, working part-time, enough money to, you know, try to put a couple $100 in the savings account and not
Yeah.
get any overdraft fees. So, getting a job making $30,000 a year was like I was a millionaire. So really that wasn't the case. I just looked and found they're hiring, so I'll go do it.
Very cool. So when
Mhm.
it came to that moment when you started your part-time job and which is now your full-time job, what was that turning point on why you'd wanted to create it?
Well, are you saying when did I make the decision? Why did I make this my full-time job, right?
No, no, no. Like, why'd you start it as a part-time job when you were already at your business, being the, your job right out of school and you
Oh, I
became,
see.
yeah, like, why'd you start that job? Like,
Oh,
was there something that kind of sparked it?
yeah. So frankly, I was successful in my younger years. I made National Honor Society. I was used to getting straight A's. I was captain of my athletic team. So I had a lot of experience in being successful. And when I was confronted with a person that had done something that I hadn't done yet,
Hmm.
I said, well, I can't let that happen. So it was more of I was kind of used to being kind of successful, I guess is the best way to put it. And that was just another challenge.
Gotcha. Okay, and then
Mhm.
get to the point where you left your full-time gig to kind of go full-time with your part-time job. What was that turning point on kind of going full force into it?
Okay, so this is where I was laughing. So I was an honest worker.
Okay.
I would say 95% of the time. So when I say I had a full-time job and then I had this part-time thing, when I had to put in my 8 hours or whatever was required for the job that I had, I made sure that I did it, right?
Yeah.
So what that means is that during the workday, outside of my lunch break, I'm working. I'm not doing anything with the FDA group. Well, if it's doubling and tripling every year, that means after I'm done working, I now am transitioning into the FDA group and I'm doing all of that. Well, if I'm working a full-time job and now I'm working a part-time job that is sucking up 4 to 5 hours a day, you have to understand I'm married at this point, right?
Okay.
So there's something I'm not doing,
Yeah.
which is being a husband and a father. So I got the knock on my office door, and my wife said, something's gonna have to change. And and she was right. Something did have to change. There was I talk about in my book, The Passionate Workforce Understands Swells and Trajectories.
Hmm.
So a swell is when you get really busy, but you know it's going to come back down.
Yeah.
A trajectory is when you get really busy and there's no reason to believe that it's going to come back down. I was on a trajectory. So I had to, prioritize my priorities. And
Mm,
that was the pivotal moment when I said, I'm actually making more money with the FDA group than I am my full-time job. So I think now's probably a good time to just go full-time.
absolutely. So you had no help at that time? You didn't have any employees?
Um, I did.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah. That was interesting. So I actually had a couple employees while I had a full-time job. So I think I kind of struggled, I'm big into security and I I guess I like to take, at that point, I like to take measured risks. And there was just something about leaving the security of a paycheck that really made me nervous.
Yeah.
So I actually did have employees that were working for me full time while I
Really?
wasn't.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
very, very interesting. Yeah.
The owner
So
and CEO part-time job, but all employees full-time.
yeah.
That's odd.
Yeah, it was very, very strange, but it didn't last very long. It was, probably maybe a couple years at tops. So,
Okay.
and one of the employees was my brother.
Okay.
So in that regard, it was kind of a little bit more understandable. And then the people that I was billing were subcontractors. So in that regard, it was a little bit kind of not as bizarre, but still bizarre.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Very. I
Mhm.
don't think I've ever heard a situation like this ever.
Well, now you have.
Yeah. So let's talk about the FDA group. What are you guys all about?
So simply stated, we help pharmaceutical and medical device companies with the FDA, just like you would hire an accountant to help you with the IRS or a lawyer to help you with the DOJ.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hmm.
Interesting. So how I you don't have to answer this and I could take it out if you want me to, but how are you able to use FDA in your company name?
Yeah, I get that question several times a
Do
year.
you? Okay.
Yep. And I started the company in 2007, so I got it pretty early on.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I hired a law firm to tell me, can I actually call myself the FDA group?
Yeah.
And I can because there's two things I'm not doing. One is I'm not representing myself as the FDA, nor am I representing myself as being connected to the FDA,
Gotcha.
which is obvious because if FDA is a regulatory authority, so if I was representing myself as the FDA, nobody would ever call me.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I remember just reading your bio and I'm like, how did he get away with that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with it.
Okay, very
Yeah.
cool. So a pharmaceutical company comes into the market, new product, they come to you kind of to be the liaison between you and the FDA, like how to get into the FDA and past.
Yes. So that part makes up 10% of our business.
Oh, okay.
80% of our business is actually helping companies after they've already gotten approval to comply with FDA regulations. So
Gotcha.
simply stated, you can't make pills in your bathtub,
No,
right?
no, you can't.
And you've seen the people wearing spacesuits and all that kind of stuff. So there's all of these regulations and guidances that FDA has in order to make sure that when drug products and medical devices are manufactured,
Hmm.
that they're safe and they're not contaminated.
Gotcha. So are you sticking around even afterwards? Because I feel like once you get passed by the FDA, you're still getting tested by them and, getting up standards and check-ins and stuff. Are you still with the customer during that time?
Yeah. So
Okay.
most of our customers are long term, right?
Gotcha.
Because and then I don't mean to get too esoteric, but once you become commercial, you have to create a quality management system, which is essentially a system that allows you to comply with the FDA regulations, and it's documented evidence about how you're manufacturing your products
Hmm.
and how you're handling all sorts of different things. How do I report complaints? How do I handle incoming raw materials and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so compliance is a in the moment type of thing. So at one point I can be compliant and then tomorrow I can decide not to put my gloves on and now I'm not compliant, right? Or I could start to not pay attention to the procedures that ensure safety and compliance with the FDA regulations. So just because you have reached a level of compliance at a particular moment doesn't mean a year from now you still are. Because companies are evolving, new people are
Yeah.
hiring, they're opening up new facilities, producing new drug products. So it's a living and breathing system that requires oversight. And
Yeah.
so where they our clients always need a certain level of support from us just to make sure things are in order. Kind of like you might go through a financial audit or have somebody take a look at the health of your accounting system and things like that.
Gotcha. So what is the percent? I mean, obviously not everything gets passed through the FDA. So what is your percentage of clients that don't like you do all this work and then they end up not even getting passed by the FDA and they kind of have to start from square one?
Um, it depends on the what stage they're at, right?
Okay.
So there's this thing called clinical trials,
Yeah.
and there's primarily three phases. There's four, but I'm not going to talk about the fourth. So
Okay.
there's phase one, which is a safety study. So you have a clinic and you put drugs into people and make sure that they don't grow another arm, right?
Yeah.
And before you even do that, you're testing it on animals. But once you've tested it on animals, then you move into phase one. Then you move into phase two, which is now we're still testing the safety, but now we're also looking at efficacy.
Mm,
And then you move into phase three, which is the pivotal study where you've got a big enough sample size to prove statistical significance that it is effective and still safe. As you
gotcha.
move into each of those stages, more and more companies drop off, right?
Okay.
So you'll have somebody testing safety. Oh, it's not safe. Back to the lab. Or we got to phase two, it's not being effective enough, or now we're seeing some new side effects. Back to the lab. Or you go to the pivotal, God forbid, which does happen because that's the most expensive one,
Mm,
and you're not able to prove statistical significance. Back to the lab. So I don't actually know their percentage, but if I had to guess, I would say it's probably sub 10% that actually enter the clinic and exit with commercial approval.
10%. Wow.
Yeah, and that's a guess. It's an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
educated
No,
guess.
no.
It's an educated
I
guess,
won't
but it's
hold
a
you to it.
guess.
No,
Yeah.
no, I won't hold you to it. But that's
And that's one of the reasons when you'll investors look into helping clinical development and drug development companies, the risk reward is very high.
hmm
So it's a huge risk to invest, especially as an angel. But in return, there's a big payout if you are successful and go to market.
very interesting.
Yeah.
So what is the benefit? So I'm gonna kind of relate this to real estate. You know, anybody could go and sell their house, but not anybody could be a real estate agent. And sometimes people are like, "Hey, why do I even hire a real estate agent if I could sell my house myself?" I mean, it's going to be a lot of paperwork, a lot of money on your end. But what is the benefit of a pharmaceutical company or somebody coming to you for the help of going through the FDA? Do they need to have a company like yourself to get through it? Or is it just because of your experience you
To
could
get
get them through
regulatory
it?
approval?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And we're not talking about clinical support and clinical studies for just the regulatory piece.
Yes,
No,
correct.
you do not need that.
Okay.
Now, but at the same time, keep in mind that your analogy goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
So
It's true. Yeah.
that person that owns the house doesn't know how to sell a house,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? People that know how to develop a drug don't know how to submit a regulatory application.
Yeah. Yeah,
Those are two
exactly.
different things.
Absolutely.
Now, some larger pharmaceutical companies in-house it, and so they can do all that stuff on their own. So some companies outsource it and some companies do it themselves.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, yeah, with real estate, if you want to sell your house, you can, but I've never heard a situation where a homeowner actually sells their house and actually goes smoothly. So, it makes sense. You want to hire the professional that has the experience, knows what they're doing, which is awesome. But
Well,
when did it?
especially with something like drugs, because on average it takes I want to say it's 7 to 8 years and $1 billion if you go from start to finish.
7 to 8 years,
So
really?
and $1 billion.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah, it's very, very expensive.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about people that are putting up that type of money, the well, let's give it a shot, right? That's not what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're optimizing your potential for a positive outcome.
Exactly. I mean, especially if you put so much money into the drug phase and you're barely scraping by just to get past, you don't want to mess up or have that wrong person involved that's in charge.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So when did you go and write a book? Was it always something that you always wanted to be an author?
No,
No. Okay.
no. What ended up happening was I had several people start to tell me that I thought differently,
Okay.
and I'm a learner. So I mean, I've been reading two business books every quarter for about 10 years. And I'm a member of Vistage, which is the world's largest peer advisory group. I have my MBA. So, one of the pieces of advice that I like to give is never stop learning, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
if you're not moving forward, then you're moving backward. I've accumulated a lot of knowledge that's not my own. However, through um, no effort intentionally, I started to develop my own philosophy on leadership and management. But it used to come out just in conversations, and that those comments about I think differently,
Hmm.
that was when I kind of realized that I wasn't regurgitating what I had heard from other people. I was taking all of these ingredients from all of the books and all of the knowledge, putting them into a pot, and then creating my own recipe.
Hmm.
So at that point, I created a Word document called Book Notes. And what I noticed is I would say a lot of the same things over and over again, right? So every time I'd have a meeting or something and I would say one of those things, I was like, oh, yeah, that's really important to how I view leadership and management. Let me write it down. And so I came up with about 4 pages of book notes. And then I saw an advertisement from a publisher and decided to sign up, and the rest is history.
Hey. Is this going to be your one and only book, or is this going to be multiple?
That's funny. So yeah, people say, "Are you going to write another book?" Not anytime soon, because
Okay.
that's everything I know. I know no other things.
No other
That's
things.
that is everything that I've come to learn about leadership and management is in that book. And maybe at some point I'll be inspired to write a book on the same topic or a different topic. But for now, that's it.
That's so cool. So who is your main customer or reader that you kind of wrote this for?
CEOs and business owners, people that run organizations that have been doing it for probably 3 to 5 years and have a good company and want it great. Um,
Okay.
it is, I think there's two types of books. There's transformational books. There's Gino Wickman's Traction. There's Tony Robbins' Money Master the Game. Those books you can't listen to in the car and on the treadmill. You have to sit down, you have to read it, you have to take notes, make action items, so on and so forth. Then there's the second type of book, which I call Golden Nuggets. So, in that regard, I think of Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership or Kim Scott's Radical Candor, where you can listen to it in the car and on the treadmill and get a couple nuggets here and there and say, that's a cool idea. I think I'm going to implement that. And I like the thinking. I'm gonna use that. That's what this book is. So there's 15 pillars and an assessment tool. Very
Mm.
easy. It looks like the Net Promoter Score assessment tool, 1 to 7, 7 to 9, 9 to 10. And then there's 15 pillars. And
Okay.
so other than that, it's a book it's an easy read. And it's something that is not transformational, where again, you have to sit down and take notes and all that stuff. Um, so that's really the bullseye. Now, with that said, anybody that leads and manages can benefit from 95% of this book. There
Okay.
are certain pieces of this book where a mid-level leader and manager is not going to be able to make certain decisions. Like I advocate for unlimited paid time, unlimited time off. And I also advocate for profit sharing. So mid-level managers don't necessarily have the authority to make those decisions. However, still think it's good that they're aware of the concept, because while they can't make those decisions, they could certainly advocate for them.
Yeah, I feel like it'd be really good for someone that is just, an employee that's trying to be a CEO or be a manager, to kind of like get their mindset correct to one day be in that position.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say, there's the bullseye, which is the CEO that I talked about, 3 to 5 years, good company, not great. Then the outside of the bullseye is anybody that leads and manages.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when it comes to advice for anybody that's trying to maybe start their own business or kind of step out of that corporate job and kind of start finally take full force into their passion career, what advice do you have for them or you wish you told yourself or someone told you when you did that leap of faith?
So what advice would I give to somebody that wants to start their own business?
Yeah.
Um, Look at different ideas.
Okay.
And you're going to come up with more than one idea. That's not good.
Okay.
And you shouldn't do it, right? And I think there's so much optimism and positivity that sometimes we're and never give up and all that kind of stuff, that sometimes I get concerned that people come up with an idea and they just, well, I'm going to do it. It's got to work. Everybody tells me it's going to work. I just have to try. Not necessarily the case. You have to really uh, conduct a feasibility assessment about whether or not this business has potential to get off its feet and become legitimate.
Yeah.
So I would say look at different ideas, conduct a feasibility assessment, and don't be trapped by the fact that you invested time and money into it. That's another trap I think a lot of people fall into. A good analogy is anybody that's created a PowerPoint with 40 slides, they have to go over every slide because they made it. So they
Mhm.
have to show it, you know? When in reality, maybe if you're given a presentation, you can kind of skip through some of those slides because it's not pertinent for whatever that presentation is. And when it comes to creating a business, sometimes and I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer, but it's the truth of the matter is some ideas you shouldn't move forward with. And until you actually have found the right idea and it is feasible and you can make it happen.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. I think when you're in that early stage of figuring something out or you think it's going to be a great business idea, you're very excited. And it's
Mhm.
very hard to kind of step out of your body for a little bit and kind of figure out, is this actually logical? Is this a good idea? For the most part, I've seen you, and I'm probably sure that you have seen so many businesses fail. And you probably think, well, why did they think that idea was a smart idea? Maybe they have something there that could be really, really good, but they just didn't think it through enough.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I love that. Well,
Mhm.
I want to finish on where people could follow you, your website, and then where people could buy your book.
Yeah, sure. So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active.
Okay.
So it's Nicholas with an H, Chapman with no H. So it's Capman, Capman. That's the best place to contact me. In terms of the book, it's in softcover, hardcover, electronic, and Audible. Wherever you can find it, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. There's a whole bunch of other applications that the publisher said it was on that I've never heard of, but it's kind of hard not to find it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicholas, for hopping on the Pro Series. I can't wait to get this one out.
Okay, thanks so much, Eric.